Hello, welcome to the August 18th, 2026 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo. I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply ask, or questions can be sent in advance to clubcubase at steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed with the number of questions that come in. We will go through all of the questions chronologically as asked. When asking your questions, it's always helpful if you could indicate exactly like what program you're using. If it's Cubase, it could be on any Steinberg program, but if it's Cubase, whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro. Also, if you could indicate which version number, so if it's Cubase 13, 14, 15, and the operating system, that information is often very helpful. So again, we will go through all the questions chronologically. We should have an index of all of the topics that are discussed in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream is over. And if you wanted to, in that way, you could quickly navigate to that particular topic in the live stream without having to watch the entire 4 hours or however long we go. If you want to search for topics been covered in previous live streams, you could go to you could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that website. We also have two people that serve as moderators that we want to thank. So we have Jazz Dude and Agent K. So they're not Steinberg employees. They just really make it a better community experience. And also we'll give extra gratitude to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a great resource of information that is available for the Steinberg community. So if you're looking to download templates, presets, links to tutorials, articles, there's all sorts of wonderful information there to check out. Once again, my name is Greg Undo. I'm presenting from the United States, just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself, or if you're even watching afterwards, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. It's always great to see people from all over the world joining. And with that, we'll go ahead and begin. All right, so we see Klaus joining from Malmo, Sweden. We have Stefan also joining from Sweden. We have Taylor from Music for World Peace Records joining from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. Just thinking of Pine Grove, I just drove by it yesterday, returning home for my cousin's wedding, I think in McAdoo, so just about a half hour away off of 81. Taylor. All right, and Taylor's question is there a way to transpose a vocal track in VariAudio without transposing the descriptives and plosives? I don't think that there is. So if we're looking at like a VariAudio part, so say if we come over here, so if we're looking at our VariAudio, so if we wanted to, we could transpose the entire track if you wanted to, but sometimes it sounds like maybe you don't want maybe like the start, like the transitions of notes to do. So there isn't an automatic kind of decompose feature, but if we come over here, we could hold down, if we go to the bottom area here, we could just kind of select kind of like the meat and potatoes of a note and just be able to quantize those note segments, but you probably would have to come over here to the bottom and separate those so that we can make, we could transpose kind of, if we don't want it's going to hold down my command or control key. Let's see if we can select multiple segments. But you could come over here, and once you have like those note segments selected, you could transpose, but there isn't a way to automatically separate the, so if we come over here, we could transpose, but there isn't a way to automatically separate the, so if we come over here, we could transpose, but there isn't a way to automatically separate the, so if we come over here, we could transpose, but there isn't a way to automatically separate the, so if we come over here, we could transpose, but there isn't a way to automatically separate the, so if we come over here, we could transpose, but there isn't a way to automatically separate the, so if we come over here, we could transpose, but there isn't a way to automatically separate the, so if we come over here, we could transpose, but there isn't a way to automatically separate the, so if we come over here, we could transpose, but there isn't a way to automatically separate the, so if we come over here, we could transpose, but there isn't a way to automatically separate the, so if we come over here, we could transpose, but there isn't a way to automatically separate the, so if we come over here, we could transpose, but there isn't a way to automatically separate the, so if we come over here, we could transpose, but there isn't a way to automatically separate the, so if we come over here, we could So if we have multiple segments selected here, we could transpose those segments if that's split, but there isn't going to be a way necessarily to decouple the plosives and frictives that I know of automatically from the particular transposition to isolate those for those not to be transposed. All right, so you see Rick Ballantyne on from Whittier, California says, "Hey, Greg, question. A couple times on films, Cubase has failed to generate thumbnails when I add more clips to the project and when I generate them in the pool. When I try, would you know why?" I don't know. So if it's, I'm not sure if the thumbnails are for the film or if it's for the audio file. So, the audio files, once we're in our pool window, so we could come over here to our pool window and we could see our audio files here, and we'd have the option to, if we choose to, so if we don't have a image file, we could generate the thumbnail cache. If it is a video file, sometimes the video codec can make a difference. So let's say if I want to look at a video codec, so we could, Cubase will be optimized for, different video codecs and container types. So we'll just come over here, say, and if you just do like video support in Cubase, in the Steinberg Help Center. So if you just come over here, there will be all right, so make sure that your video file, so if you're adding more clips to the project, make sure, unlike WAV files, which are pretty standard, like a WAV file, any program that can play WAV file can play any WAV file, but with, video files, they each will have a codec, which is a compressor, decompressor. So you could compress the file and it decompresses it on playback, and that's how we could get a large amount of data that's in the video file to look good at smaller sizes. With that, make sure if you come over here to the supported video formats that you actually see that, like if the container, which is like the file extension, is a .mov, .avi, or .mp4, you could see which codec is going to be used for that. And there's a utility program called Handbrake that a lot of people use, so you can convert it to the correct combination of codec and containers. Probably, so if it's the video file that's missing the thumbnail, at that point, maybe try to work with the video file so that it is a recognized container codec combination. Great, wonderful to see Adam Langford joining from Bedfordshire in the UK. See Uno Memento joining from Finland. Thanks for joining us, being such a loyal attendee. Always great to see Jazz Dude on, sharing Cubase tutorial website and also some Steinberg artist. See Tony Trunzo joining from Australia. For being on. We see Vince's Flyvy joining from Winnipeg. Well, Vince. So we see Vishnu, great to see you on from India. We see Rob Schmedeke joining from Tarpon Springs, Florida. See. Sorry, my chat field jumped. comments. All right, we see Soren from Sweden, Michael Teams joining from Weatherford, Texas. Great. We have John Costigan joining from A Comfortable, Wisconsin. Matt Else. Tim Weinheimer joining from Mission Viejo in County, California. Great. So we see Rick just saying it's the thumbnails are for the film. Sorry, so no problem. Yeah, so try to check the codec on the particular files. All right, so we have Mike Soundmaster saying hello from Germany. Says thanks for the informative videos, Greg. So thanks for joining us, being part of the community. Guys, dudes received 1 gallon of Scoopy's Black Diamond ice cream from my teams, distributing ice cream around. Right, we have John Barry VU joining in from Devon, England. All right, so we see Soren just says, problems for me is OmniVocal / Synthesizer V Studio Pro Vocals. It has to be declared generative AI when distributed now. It'll have the same tag as some Suno vocals, apparently, tag AI assisted. I could do some research on that and see, if it is, I know that a lot of, I believe I'm pretty, and I've done a little bit of research, not a lot, but a lot of the tagging that's being done is actually kind of inserted into the audio file. And I think it's like metadata that's being read, or maybe kind of like a, something sonically that's detected when the programs are generating the AI so that they could do recognition of it later for revenue. But I don't think that there's anything, that's would automatically be detected from like an AI situation, like an AI detection thing with OmniVocal. But I could do some more research and find out. All right, so we see Vishnu says, Greg, I've sent you a mail, 2 questions. Could you kindly check and answer in the live stream? So we'll do those now. I know it's late in India. So let me go over to Vishnu's questions. All right. So he says, could you kindly explain the pre and post faders in Cubase? Please let me know what colors they represent. Okay, so let's just do a new project here. All right, so it's not necessarily so we'll show you what pre and post faders are doing. Let me just. If I could find a project that would. On this here. All right, so pre and post faders just mean, and we often see these in the sends. So what we want to do is, let's say I have this vocal. Not a sound. Right, I just have this vocal is going into my reverb, so we will listen to it dry here. Something's wrong. We can't go on. All right, so when we go to our effects here, I'm going to adjust. Now we're going to turn on our effect send. So Now, when we use our effect send, let's say we'll just have it on our vocals here. And I could blend the amount of reverb. Right, so we could blend more reverb in. Now we could switch this if we right click to be pre-fader or post-fader. So the default will be post-fader. Right. So when I have it as post-fader, what we can do now is when I adjust this, this will be that reverb's going to be added in the signal flow after the fader. So if I bring this up, and if I drop the fader, that fader is affecting how much of that send is being applied into the channel. Right, and we can see that that's going to be. And I'll just make this a little more reverb here. Make it a little easier to hear. You stare at the ground. Right, so now when I bring the fader down, the signal that's feeding into the send is also based upon the fader position. Now if I right click and we switch this to pre-fader, so now that fader, that send isn't affected by the fader position. So that send is pre-fader. So regardless of where my actual file is here, that send level is going to stay the same. We could send more or less, but it's not going to be affected by the gain of the fader. So that way we have consistent, if we have automation, we're not affecting kind of how much of the reverb is going on the tracks. So if we have a lot of volume automation, you may want the reverb level to be consistent and not be more reverb when it's a little bit louder. That's when we could just go kind of like to pre-fader. So I like to think of, if you can't, and the colors don't really signify anything other than a difference between pre and post fader. So how I remember it, I think of it as blue, red. I know it's not perfectly blue, aqua. That's so great with colors. I missed that day of preschool. But let's say orange, red, aqua, blue. So, you know, to me, those aqua blue come in the alphabet earlier than orange, red-ish colors. So I think of that as being pre, and then the orange red alphabetically being kind of later in the alphabet, and may not work for different languages, I realize. But that's how I remember the colors for pre and post. So now the next question we had from Vishnu is this is more of a general question. Could you kindly tell me how I could increase the width of a mix, and can you guide me on tools specifically inside of Cubase? All right, so let's come to a project here. Let me just one that's benefit from widening. All right, so you know, obviously panning is something that can help quite a bit. So as we work on panning and doing different elements, so you know, kind of classic, like a lot of classic hard rock stuff. If you have two guitarists in the band, one guitar may be in the right channel, one guitar may be in the left channel. So let's say if we have
what did you say? You wished it all away.
If you're looking for like kind of a one plugin type of solution, you know, if we come over here, we could say, okay, let's go to stereo enhancer, right under spatial and panner. So, you know,
and a day you were the party, the
So if I want to take this and make the whole mix wider, now if you go too far with this, it could affect mono compatibility. So sometimes we just kind of manipulate the phase with this.
Now I'm uninvited.
But that's kind of a...
I'm on the outside looking in. You put the close sign up.
So your mixes are kind of sounding very narrow.
All the lights went out and it got dark. Where do I go from here? Where do I go from here? Where do I go from here?
We'll have the drums kick in here.
I'm uninvited.
So we have kind of our full mix. Now sometimes if you put this on the mix, everything will be wider, and that may not be what you want for bass and like kick drum and bass. So in that case, if we go to your imager plugin, this is actually a multi-band imager. So again, under spatial panner, so we can say I want my bass frequencies to be a little more mono, but let's make our high end really wide. Having specific frequencies be wider or narrower. So sometimes, you know, making other things can open up if you may not have to accentuate the width of like particular frequencies. It could be like taking low end frequencies and making them less mono. That opens up the mix. So one other thing that is kind of common in mix is, let's take like if we wanted to have...
What did you say?
So say as we get...
Oh yeah. Thought I would be.
Alright, so say I want to take... let's find the guitar part here. Alright, so while we're coming over here, we could say, okay, I want to take this guitar part. And if we add, let's say, a reverb, you know, one of the things that I could do is I could pan this track, the guitar, to the right. But let's go to our panning of the reverb. And I could go to my effects and I could pan the reverb in the opposite side. So you could have an element pan to the right, but have its reverb pan to the left. And obviously, if you have like two guitar parts, two keyboard parts, a guitar and a piano, pan those. It doesn't have to be all the way hard left, hard right. You know, you could often go kind of halfway, and that could really kind of open up your stereo image well. Let me know if that makes sense, Vishnu, and thanks for joining us live. I know it's late in India where you are. Appreciate you being part of the community. Right, so we see Hatfield jumped. Okay. All right, so we see from Taylor, says, can noise frequencies, hard consonants be separated from vocal in spectral layers 11? Let's take a look real quick. So I'm going to bounce this select. It might have been one of the things that's added in 13 over. Okay, so let's say if we have our vocal here.
From here, where do I go from here?
Right, so let's take a look. So I think if you go to unmix components, do this vocal file here. I think this was added in 13, if I'm not mistaken. Here we could have
here, where do I go
the
from
tonal.
here?
So if you want to get rid of noise. And also transients.
I face my heart. How do I just forget that? Where do I start?
So you could just do it right there. So when you go to the modules, you'll see unmixed components. At that point, you'd break apart the tonal, the transient, and then you could drag each of those onto the project window, bounce their selections, and do VariAudio on just a tonal part if you wanted to. So let me know if that makes sense for you. See you on Taylor. All right, so we see from Jackie Barr says, is there a way to set the note length for 6/8 time as dotted quarter, which is the way it's actually counted? You imported a song that's 56 beats per minute, 6/8, but Cubase won't take the dotted quarter. So, you know, it's what you could do. Let's say if we have a time signature of 6/8, so we don't necessarily say, okay, the beat is set to, if you're in 6/8, where the beat is set to a dotted quarter, but if you're recording or tracking, what you could do is I'll just do new project here. All right, so let's add a signature track. All right, so we'll make our signature track 6/8. Okay, so as we work here, we'll play our metronome. All right, now we have, for different meters, we could have our click pattern. So now if I want to come over here, I want it to be like set for dotted quarter notes. What we could do is say, okay, I want to do. And if you wanted it to be subdivided, we could just say if you want the pulses just on the one, or the triplet feels implied, like 1 to da 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 da, or so you could also do different divisions like this if you wanted to, or not have the clock pulse divisions. Now, if we are editing, what we could do is, let's say if we have an instrument track, okay, at this point, when we go into, let's say we go into our edit grid here. So let's go ahead and we'll just move this to our grid here. Okay, so we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have our 6/8 divisions here. And within our editor, see the 6/8 divisions laid out for us directly here. Well, so, and if you just need to convert, like, so that should be, so if we're at 120 beats a minute, let's say if you go to 56 beats a minute, which is I think what you mentioned. So, once you do that, and if you need to just, do the math of the ratio of, 2 to 2/3 for the tempo, you could do that. But, and when we do all, let's say, of the editing in our 6/8, one of the things that we could also do is use the metronome click pattern. So let's say on our click pattern that we saw here, again, this is going to be, let's say we have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have our click line. So again, if I come over here, we could say you right click in our time, and we could use the metronome click pattern for our different subdivisions. So that you could have like your different grid lines of emphasis. So as we want to put notes in, let's say we just want to put in eighth notes here. So we can see that when we have the metronome click pattern level for grid emphasis. So if we're doing 3 and 3, instead of this being like 3/8 notes or 3/4 notes, we can now do that, and we see that because we have the our metronome set up for us right there. We could also have that click pattern emphasis right here. So as we do this, we could still edit in 6/8, see everything in 6/8, have different click patterns if you wanted to. So let's say you're doing a 6/8 that's not 3 plus 3, that's maybe 2 plus 4. We could just have that set up as well. So or if you want to do 4 plus 2, and you can see that as we adjust this, we could have our emphasis lines in the pattern change match well. Let me know if that's helpful for you, Jackie Bar. So we see Tim Weinheimer just says, thanks Steinberg for a great tutorial on how to use 5/4 and 7/4. Great video Cubase with Darren Lopez. You guys who shared the link. All right, so we see CC Lealgo says, did you make this program? So I didn't make the program. There's really, really smart people throughout the world, mostly based in Hamburg, Germany, who create the program. I just hope to explain it, like their wonderful work. I hope to explain it to people, so if there's something they're not understanding, that's why we do this, but I'm not a developer. I wish I was smart enough. Michael Pierce says that Nick is doing a little better, but he hasn't heard from Michael Pierce. I got an email from Michael Pierce, so it's like he's going through some things. But I'll send him well wishes from the live stream. All right, so we have James Daly saying hello from Vancouver, Canada. Thanks for joining us. All right, so you see from Soren says, learned about today some kind of transparency idea. The actual sound is machine made, no matter how much work put into it, and should be called AI generative. At example, DistroKid, EU AI Act. I mean, it's hard to know where that goes. If you record yourself, is that an actual recording of yourself, or is that if it's captured in a computer, if you program a drum beat, is that generative AI, or if you use drum loops? I think it's all still a bit of Wild West. So you see from FlyV, says, do you know what a control pedal is or does? So, control pedals are often, if it's what I'm thinking, sometimes you may have a pedal input for controllers. And that pedal input, so for instance, I have a CC121 controller. So when I go over here to my studio setup, here we have a foot switch. So, and I could assign, some controllers may have a foot switch that is assignable to different functions in the program. So, like for instance, my CC121 controller, if I'm tracking, I may just want to use it to hit record. Or if I'm editing, I may just come over here and say, okay, I want this to, if I'm doing lots of edits, I may want to just have it, do like an undo function. So different MIDI controllers can take like a pedal input and translate that pedal input into a MIDI message. That MIDI message could be used to control different parts of the program. So like stuff where you're holding a guitar, or you have, drumsticks in both hands, you're playing piano, keyboard with both hands, and your foot is free, you could use a foot switch to activate certain functions in the program. That's what I'm kind of thinking from the description, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding. From CG Lealgo says about Cubase. Other question is, if I made the program, it says it's magic. So I think that Cubase is pretty magical. Special program. I've been using it for going on 35 years. Pretty November. Rick and Whittier is ready for some fun and learning. Soren is just mentioning about the AI vocal detection. Says, I suppose it is what it is, but I hate being tagged the same way as some kind of prompter of vocals when you use Omni vocals. Yeah, I'll see if I can get some more clarification on that. We have Willie Chill 786 just saying Cubase with a big thumbs up. So Vishnu saying thanks a lot, Greg, for the in-depth explanation. So you're welcome. Thanks for joining us. Rick, Ratman Studios received 1 gallon of lemon meringue pie ice. All right, Daniel Pashman asks, is it possible to assign screens to where plugins open every time? It seems to be random in the current setting I'm in. Thanks. I think, if it's a template, it may be stored within the template, but I believe that, so let's say if we have an audio track here and we open a plugin on that audio track, I believe that it will open up in the same location every time. So let's say up that, let's go to Black Valve, I move this, let's go to frequency, Okay. So now let's say I've kind of moved all of these plugins from their where they opened up. So I think it may open up kind of in the center of the screen, but now that I've opened up that particular plugin, it goes to the location where we had last set and opened that plugin. Let's add another audio track. Okay, and let's go Arlette on. So I think it kind of goes maybe for the center of the project window is kind of what it looks like it aims for. So, and then once it's moved, at that point, if we go back to our original track here, open up that Carlette, it's going to be opened up in the location where I left it last. So if you're opening up the project and maybe you move the plugin window so that it was out of the way of another track, and then you open it up again. But it looks like as plugins are kind of loaded the very first time, that it will just come right over here and try to open it in the center of the main project window. So, if that makes sense, not what you're seeing. Great. So we see VariAudio MIDI joining from Denmark. I just had a friend that went to Copenhagen vacation. Really enjoyed it quite a bit. All right, so we see from Jackie Barr says yes for the 6/8 question. Okay, so what tempo do I need to put to make it actually playing at 56 beats per minute? I'm stuck in quarter note. It just mathematically determined? Yeah, so it's just going to be 1.5, 1. So it's just the ratio. So. Great. So we see, let's see if we want to, let's see if we could just figure out like the tempo of that for you. All right, so let's say we want to keep like a steady time between, so let's say we're in 6/8. And let's say we want to keep the pulses the same. So let's go to 4/4 here. Speed the tempo up here. All right, so let's say we will kind of keep the same pulse. So let's say we move this 4/4 there. Great, so let's add a tempo track. Say 100 here. Great, so let's say if I want, say we're at 100 beats per minute there. So let's say if we're doing, go to our project logical editor, and we say, we're going to transform our tempo. then we could just choose to trim, then divide by 1.5. Select it. So I think that we're just counting this. Let's do. I'm going to set this. I'll go to this tempo, and let's say we're going to go to the click pattern. To steady tempo. Let's say if I right, so just adjusting this click pattern here. If we do it to 6 visions, we figure out the formula. Let's see what this is. Oh. So, but yeah, you just kind of do the ratio, and then I'll see if I get the exact ratio figured out for Friday's live stream. But that's what you could do to kind of convert it from 4.4 to 6.8. All right, so we see from Rotom Pick, it says using Cubase Pro 11 and VariAudio, wanted to correct vocals and got clicks between segments, had to change the range start and end with the tilting and fixed. Maybe explain VariAudio smoothing edges. All right, so let's take a look. Correct. Okay, so it's like.
What did you say?
Okay, so it says we wanted to correct vocals, get clicks got clicks between segments. So a lot of times let's find some.
You wished it all away, and I'm left here for 1,000 years.
All right, so let's say if we wanted to do correction. So, when we're working with VariAudio, there's 2 different levels of smart controls. I think that we should select show all smart controls. If you have kind of the default set, get fewer controls, especially for doing tilts. But again, I would come over here just in the VariAudio tab and just select that we want to show all of the smart controls. Right, so as I work with this, now we get more options. I could adjust, for instance, the volume of a particular clip. So if we want it, while we're here, it's like that consonant could be a little louder or softer. We could do that, but we also can see these little triangles. So what we could do is we're going to adjust these little triangles, and let's listen to kind of like the transitions between these notes here. So I'm going to adjust these triangles so as not to really have an impact on kind of note transitions. All right, so now we'll listen to it.
Years and a day, you were the
Great.
and I'm left here for 1,000 years.
All right, so we're here. We can see that we did that. So now when I correct these particular notes, so we're going to correct the pitch. Don't correct the transition between the notes. So if we come over here, I can say, okay, let's make, if we look at this note, if we tighten the pitch, you see that, like if we clean up the vibrato where this is going to be perfect in the center, we could kind of choose our transitions of the notes with the triangles so that as we do different types of editing, that we could only kind of do the editing, like, as we straighten pitch, that we don't affect the particular pitch, like as we kind of deal with vibrato. So that could help quite a bit. And also, like when you have your smart tools, you could just kind of go to the bottom and click and be able to make your adjustments. If you come to like the bottom right edge between 2 segments, we could, join those 2 segments together again if you want. But, try this, especially if you're dealing with like, aiming vibrato or moving pitch, that, the transitions from notes when you're straightening can, that can often cause a lot of problems, but a lot of people don't know of these. And again, get access to that as soon as you come here to show all smart control. If that's helpful for you. Great. So you see Rodem Pick just says already purchased 15, waiting for a new computer. Enjoy your new system. It's always exciting and fun. All right. Jackie Barr asks, where are the media files stored and how do I make sure I don't delete them when making a template from a completed project? I've copied the entire project folder, but still lost all the audio files twice. All right, so if I wanted to make a template from, like this project, all right, so when we do a project and we define our project folder, like when we're starting a new project, we often will say, okay, create an empty project. And this is a very critical stage that a lot of people kind of blow through. Just immediately put it into, the same folder maybe that they used last time. Think of this as when it's asking for the project folder, I tried to, I give this advice to people that I would always suggest making one folder for each song. So each song is a separate folder. Now you could have subfolders. So if it's an album project where you have 12 songs and you're like, okay, I want to have everything in one folder, but think of having a subfolder, but each project can have its own folder. Because when we record audio into a folder, so let's come over here, we'll say, okay, let's go to August 18th, we'll make a new folder, and come here to record file test. Okay, so this is my project folder, so we create a new folder here. I'm going to add an audio track. We're going to record. Now this file is being placed as soon as audio is recorded. It's creating a folder called audio in the folder, the project folder that we defined. So when we go to our pool window, Control or Command plus the letter P, we could see the path for our file as we kind of scroll over. So this is going to be in the live streams August 18th, and this is the record files test folder. So that's the folder we just created, and this audio file is in that folder. Now, when you were working with templates, we often want to not have the actual audio file. So the audio files are generally going to be from within for a particular song. Many people would want, if I save this project as a template, so I'll say, okay, let's save as template. Now I have a test file here. Okay, so I'm going to come over here. So this is saved as a template. So I'm going to close this project that we just created. I'm going to open, I'm going to do a new project. I'm going to start it with our August 18th template. So, and now we can put it into a separate folder. So I'm going to come over here and say folder. All right. Now, often when we do this, so we'll activate this project. Now this audio file is stored within the template. Generally, most people don't want to do that if you're working maybe for like sonic branding, where it's like, okay, every project I do for this client, I need these 10 audio files where like they're corporate, sonic sound, their corporate sound. So, and I need to always have access to this. But if it was a template and now I have this audio file that's called up, if we look at that audio file, we could see that the audio file that I carried over from the template is still in its location, in its original location. So it's in the record file test. And if I record a new audio file, now we stop, we look at our folder, we could see that that new file to test is going to be in the project folder. So a lot of times what I would do if I was building a template, if you don't want the audio files to be automatically carried over and in a different folder when using it as a template, what I would do to start off is say, okay, I want to do a new project. If I was building a template based on another project, I would just come right over here. Let's create an empty project. Okay, and what I want to do now is choose to import tracks from project. So let's come over here. Let's go to this uninvited project. All right, so now I could see all of my tracks. I could select all, but we could choose which particular events to import. So I can say, okay, I want the channel and inspector settings. I probably don't want automation, and I don't want the actual events and the parts. I just want their tracks with the routing set up. So now when I hit OK, I have everything automatically configured with my different tracks. We could have our vocal track assigned here. Everything is preserved. Everything is carried over except for the actual media, like the MIDI information, the audio information, and there's no audio information I didn't want to copy over the automation. Now at this point, we could save this as a template, and this template is clean from all audio files. So say, all right, so when you go to the pool window in this project, so I'm saving that as a template, we can see that we have no audio files in that pool. And I will come over, let's go to our new project. We'll use our uninvited our template. Go to user templates here. Right, so here's our uninvited template with no audio. I say create, here's our new folder, and now there's no kind of persistent audio files that are being carried over from a project. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Jackie Bar. And then hopefully you know, that way you're not kind of, you know, using a project as a template. So a template, I prefer it personally to be, you know, like, you know, the purpose of a template is that it's a starting off point that isn't tied to a particular location, so that your project contains all the audio files. Your template, ideally, most people prefer for it not to have audio files, but there could be, you know, exceptions for that as well, depending on, like, I always need this, you know, these particular audio files for a client, something like that. All right, so you see from John Barry says, "Hi Greg, how can I change all the first version track version names to original with the Project Logical Editor? Many thanks." Not sure if it's addressable through the Project Logical Editor, but we'll try. So let's make a new track version. If you're not familiar with what a track version is, and I'll just go back to the original project here. Or if we could rename track version, give it a shot. Okay, so if we're here, a track version, if you're not familiar with it, is kind of an alternate version. So if I have like something I think is really cool, and let's take another stab at it, we could do a new track version. When we do that, we see that this will be called, you know, V1 and version 2. We could rename these as we do it. But I think what John wants to do is to have like the V1 automatically be called original. So let's see if we could do that. Project Logical Editor. I'm inclined to think it might not work, but shot. So let's say we have media type is going to be equal to their container type, equal to track. Don't have track versions, but we'll see. And I'm going to transform this, and let's say it just here. So we want to replace like the parenthesis V1 with original. Your name, and we will say place. We'll say B1. Let's see if that. To replace search string. All right, so let's see if we could. Case dependent. Seeing if I could replace just that one word or parenthesis. See if I could do one without the. Yeah, so it doesn't look like that works. I could, but it doesn't seem like. I mean, we could rename the version here and just put original, but it looks like maybe that's outside of when we go to rename the event. It's like that might be like if it's because it's in parenthesis. Try one other thing to see if we get rid of the parentheses. Yeah, so it seems like maybe it's kind of since it's maybe a suffix on the original track name. I could play around with it, see if I could come up with something for Friday's live stream, but it may not. You may have to manually rename the track version, and not do it kind of globally through the project logical editor. But I'll continue to play around with it, John. Sorry about that. All right, so Rapia66 says in Cubase Pro 15, why can I see my selected plugins but not my VST instrument in the mixer window, or even change them all without open another window? All right, so let's say if I have, so let's take a look. Preference. Okay, so I think maybe, all right, so let's look at, so let's say we're here, and we have different virtual instruments. Okay, so why can I see my selected plugins but not my VST instrument in the mixer window, or even change them? Because the instrument itself, it isn't necessarily part of the audio path. If you want to open up the instrument, so let's say, okay, I want to go to my acoustic agent. I just click here, because you have like multiple plugins, but anytime if you want to open up the instrument from the particular window, you could just kind of click right here and say, okay, this is inside of Halion Sonic, this is inside of Retrolog. So you could just click here on instrument tracks right there to open up the particular instrument. So let me know if that's helpful for you. Generally when we're doing this, we see this signal flow kind of go in, typical, very typical audio historical perspectives and lineage of top to bottom is being kind of our signal flow. So, the instrument itself isn't necessarily part of that signal flow. So, but if you need to just quickly open the instrument, just click here on, you'll see like the little piano keys. So you'll see 3 white keys and 2 black keys, and then you could open up the instrument and do your tweaking directly there. Let me know if that makes sense. So we have K Quintonate says, I'm still new to Cubase 15 Pro, but I love it. So welcome to the community, and just ask us any questions that you have, and we're here to help you. You could be a Cubase master. See that he's got Cubase mastered in about he's figured that Cubase took him about an hour to learn, so but just mostly navigation. So wow, you're smart. I'm still learning new stuff on Cubase. Uno Momento has been running it longer than me, but for more than 34 years. All right, let me go to all right, so we see John Barry says there is a has version ID in one of the menus of Project Logical Editor, but couldn't get any further. I'll have another look too. So let me see if I can find that. Maybe that would help. We have version 1, version 2. I think there's a way we could trigger the key command from Project Logical Editor. We see has a track version. I think we could like select tracks that have a track version. So let me just come over here. Over here in our roads part, do that, but I don't think it's going to be set up for naming. Let's take another quick stab at it, see. So let's see if we let's see if we could over here, maybe if we erase that. All right, I could erase after this. You're like maybe that process. Yeah, it just doesn't seem like that's maybe part of the track name. Not seeing it, it's just seeing it as the ID number. So let me just say, so even if I come here and we type in, and then it's not part of the track name, it's the ID. So I don't think the ID is selected here. Yeah, so it's not seeing it as part of the name. So it's seeing it as an ID, and I don't think the ID, track ID is separate, but I'll continue play around with it some more, John. All right, James Daly asks how to add an icon, say, see lane tracks where record monitor channel settings icons are. So if you want to add like lanes here, so let's say we have a number of audio tracks, and what you could do is right click, you go to track control settings, then you'll see all sorts of settings for different types of tracks. So if it's an audio track, we can see our lane display type. I'm going to just select it. If it's in the hidden controls, then I could add it to the visible controls. So I'll say apply, we'll hit OK. And now as we come over here, we could just have our lane icon available here. We could also save that as a preset. So if you wanted to, you could open up this, the track control settings. You'll see like a little settings cogwheel here. We could open that up. So we could say, okay, let's come over here, and we could say this is going to be, you could save a preset, call this lanes visible. And so if we hit apply, we'll hit OK. So if we have kind of very simple icons, we don't see our lanes, we could have a preset so that now our lanes are visible. And if we want it again to come over, let's go to your track control settings, right click. You could also move that up if you want it to be right after monitor or record. So now you could change the placement of the lanes. Well, so again, just try right clicking. You're not seeing the lane display. Go to track control settings, or you click here in this little settings cogwheel. See the lane display type in the hidden category. Add it to the visible, and you could do this independently for different track types. Then you could save it as a preset and call it there. All right, wonderful to see Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. Cat Buddy is waving a paw. Hello to my cat Steven and other pets that are nearby, and he's ready to learn. Great to have you on. Great to see Brian Sawyer on from Yuma, Arizona. All right, so we see Fly-V says it's got a new keyboard. How can I produce best in Cubase with the Roland Juno 6? I've gotten all audio working, but how can I get MIDI signals sent? So just see, I'm not sure if it has USB. See, I'm just going to do a quick look for Juno 6, make sure I'm thinking of the right one. 6 and 80s. They've done a number of Juno releases recently. So the Juno D6 is the more contemporary one. Right, and then there's a Juno 6 which is a vintage keyboard. So if it is the Roland Juno 6 from the 80s, my buddy Brian had one. So first polyphonic synths I think I ever played. that you would need to take the MIDI out into a MIDI interface to get MIDI out from the keyboard right in, because that was 20 years before USB was thought of and invented. If it's the Roland Juno D6, that's a more contemporary version. Then you could just take the USB out, and most USB MIDI drivers are automatically recognized by the computer, but make sure you should see it when you if it's a USB device, it may need a driver to be installed, but if you go to the MIDI port setup, see if you see the Roland Juno 6 listed. Most are kind of are plug and play and kind of automatically class compliant and are recognized by the computer operating system. So like I didn't have to install like Nectar drivers. Just when it's connected, it's class compliant so that the driver is automatically recognized. So that would probably be the case for Roland Juno D6, but the Juno 6, the older 80s polyphonic synth, would need to take the MIDI out to a MIDI interface. That could be a USB MIDI interface. It could be an audio interface, like my Steinberg UR24 that I'm using for the live stream has its own. It has a MIDI interface, so I could take a MIDI device through like a 5-pin, what's called a DIN cable. It's often referred to as a MIDI cable. I could go out from my MIDI controller directly into my MIDI interface, which may be on your audio interface, and then that would accept MIDI from the Juno 6. But if you could let me know if it's a newer keyboard or an older one, I could probably answer a little better. And I hope your new keyboard is working. I saw that Facebook that you had gotten some of your Arturia controllers maybe acting up and misbehaving. You had issues with it on previous live stream. All right, and we see from Fly Visas also doesn't really work setting up as a MIDI remote. So check to see, a Juno D6 is going to be set up for, where the controls are internally controlling sounds. But as long as it transmits MIDI, you should be able to set it up as a MIDI remote. The MIDI remote may be changing the sounds internally in the keyboard, depending on what sounds you're. All right, so we see from TrackQuest Music. Hi, Greg. I have a lot of one-shots, and what would be the best tool, let's say Groove Agent or Hallion 7, to use to put a great sound in chronological order that would give best results from time stretching? So I think you would have similar time stretching algorithms in Groove Agent, but usually you're not doing like such time stretching when you're doing one-shots. So you want to put it says one shots. What would be the best tool? All right, so let's take a look at Groove Agent. Start with. So let's come over drum parts, and I have it blank. Open up Groove Agent here. All right, so if you want like perhaps your one-shot sound, so let's come over here. All right, so let's say I have this one-shot sound, so I could drag this to a pad. All right, now if I want to come over here to my pitch, I could say let's go do a key range. And then we could say, All right, so we select our key range. We can say our low key is C1, and we want this to automatically go to C3. So now, so that's a 2-octave range. So it doesn't automatically map it out for you. And when we go into, let's say, the sample, so here we have this in one-shot mode. We could choose, I think when we go to warp, we could choose kind of different algorithms. If we're, so here when we enable warp, we have the same length of the sample. So we go like 2 octaves higher. When warp is not on, you could have this sample play shorter. Now, if we're doing this in Hallian 7, so that's for one single sound. If we're taking a number of one-shots over, so let's go ahead and open this up again, and I will just cut hit. So if I had a number of snare drums, so let's say, okay, I'm taking all of these, type in snare. All right, so if I had just a bunch of sounds, what I could do is just drag these over, and now I could have different snares all automatically mapped to their own pad. So if if we're doing this and dragging it over, it's going to be kind of, multiple files would be the same in Hallian or Groove Agent. Now, but if I wanted to, if it was one sound that you wanted mapped across multiple keys, you don't have to set up the key range. So if I go to, let's say, Hallian for that. Great. So let's create sample instrument, and now I could just drag all of these files back to it actually just inside of Hallian's browser. Okay, so let's say we want to go to mapping, any I could just drag all of these samples to one pad, to multiple pads if you wanted to. So even if I come here, drag all of this, we could start at a specific range, say okay, and then we can have all of the samples automatically split for you. Or if you want to, again, drag here and say, and kind of move vertically, you can say, okay, now we want all those to be on individual pitches. So that way we could have one sample per pad if you wanted to. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding. But if you wanted to, drag multiple ones over, multiple samples over to create like a library of one shots. They would both function the same way. If you have like a one shot sample that you wanted to be mapped multiple pads, it could be like one step less to do it, dragging the content in with Hallian 7 versus Groove Agent, where you have to define the particular note range. Well, I don't know if that's helpful at all. Quintonate says to use FL Studio Producer, tried Cubase. Glad to have you over as a new user. Livey says, I just made a MIDI track and it records MIDI from it. Yeah, so, for your Juno D, if it's a Juno D or Juno 6, it's not an instrument track. So, you probably just record MIDI and then it's going to record the MIDI. The MIDI will be sent back to the keyboard, and then the keyboard is going to generate the sound. So a lot of times people used to refer to keyboard, like synthesizers that were rack mount versions, refer to them as like tone generators, because the MIDI would be sent to them and then they would generate the tone. Great. So we see from Grapia66, thanks, Gary. Not the answer I was hoping for. I've been using Pro Tools for many years. Just got used to being able to change every single plugin, including virtual instruments in the mixer window. I mean, I know that, Pro Tools actually just treats it like an audio plugin that accepts MIDI, whereas we're kind of more on the MIDI perspective. But, it does it, so if we are looking at, in the mix console window here, I mean, if you just, does it, let me know if this is a disadvantage, being able to, if you're opening up the instrument to change the sounds, or are you opening the instrument to change the audio characteristics of it? So it may be kind of conceptually different, but I'm not sure if there's like a significant workflow difference, and if you could explain kind of what the workflow difference is. But it's always going to be available, in the mixer. So, so the mixer here, we're generally kind of showing the audio outputs, but when you need to open up the instrument track, but it's, you don't necessarily, we have all of the audio capabilities, all of the, EQs, all of your effects, and then the instrument is available. You could change the sound there in one click as well, just like you open it up as a plugin. It's, not in the plugin source, so it's not like we go through an EQ into, because we're sending MIDI information to that. The MIDI audio from the MIDI is going out. We do have, plugins like, Groove Agent full version, Hallian, and Retrolog, where you could send audio into it via sidechain. Let me know if there's a significant workflow impairment for you with, having just the ability to open the virtual instrument, from within the mix console here, but it's not necessarily in the middle of the signal flow, because it's, before the audio is coming out of the instrument into the mixer. But if you need to change, change parts of the instrument, it's still freely available for you. Okay, so we see Flyv says, it's actually new from the box. I believe it's the D6, the Juno D6. Yeah, it's probably the newer one. So are you able to do that? And if you have your audio inputs on your audio interface, you could connect it as an external instrument under your audio connections. So if you go to your external effects or your external instruments, you could come over here and say, okay, we want my Roland Juno 6, depending, D6. It's a problem with companies like naming stuff. And what you could do here is say, okay, I want this coming into inputs 2 and 3 and 4 of my audio interface. And then at that point, you could bring the audio in. So we can say, okay, I want to go to add an instrument track. Say under external instruments, you can say, okay, this is Roland Juno D6, and we can say, then as we play, we could have the audio from the instrument routed to the end. So that could, you don't have a mixer, you could just, use your audio interface if you have two available inputs and run your Roland as a external virtual instrument. Congratulations on your new keyboard. Juno 6 came out probably 83, the original Juno 6, 83 or 84. But he had one, had it stolen from him at some point. Right, we see Brian Sawyer's making progress with his studio. So he's got electricity, green board today, and drywall in the studio. Exciting. So congratulations. All right, so we have Daniela Tokan checking in from Bochum, Germany. All right, let me go to some other questions that were mailed in. All right, I think this is from John Barry, asked last time about how to import Roland Alpha Juno SysX files into the XTC Hallian instrument. All right. All right, so the Roland Alpha Juno series, that was probably 86, 85, 86-ish. It came out as kind of the Roland version of a DX7, so instead of physical sliders, it was more kind of button pushing and software based. So let's open up a quick instance of XTC. So this is kind of just a great analog synth. So if we want to come over, and this works inside of Hallian or Hallian Sonics. Okay, but one of the things that you can do is drop a SysX file here. All right, so I think I'm going to open up my Finder window here. It's on Windows with Explorer. Great. Documents. Have it. All right, so here's SysX files. All right, so I'm going to take this, I'm going to Alt Tab or Command Tab over and drop the SysX file. All right, and now that I have done that, we can now, when we come over, we see our load. I can see my atmospheric keys. So as we want to play this, so with that SysX dump, so this is reading kind of the actual data from the Juno. So there's an Alpha Juno 1, Alpha Juno 2. The Alpha Juno 1 was 49 keys. The Juno 2 is the same instrument with 61 keys. So as we, again, come over. So if you're looking to kind of recreate that, then these sounds just find in the load. They'll be kind of categorized. So let's say, let's get to. So for our leads. And again, just coming over to say this, I'm going to Alt Tab, drag and drop, and select different sounds here. So if you have a lot of those sysx files, you could just load those up correctly. That used to sound like a real string in 1997. So, but that's how you could just drop in those sysx files. So let me know if you have any questions with that, John. Great to see Benny joining from Vince is Fly-V just saying thanks, Greg, for external instruments. Mento is just got it. Glorious sound desk. I'm very happy with. Go to some other questions that were. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Hope you're great. I need help and thought of you. Hope you see this email. I'm doing a setup with Touch OC and Cubase 14, where with a button I want to see a track or a zone bank on my mix console without changing the setup of the mix console, without scrolling on the Windows project. Just view the zone of the track I want to see on the mix console. I have 500 tracks on my mix console. I know that Cubase can go to 128 channels, but I can't figure out how to get past the first 128 channels bank to call tracks outside of the bank. I hope I'm explaining myself all right. Could you help me, please? I know how to set up Touch OC. I just need to go through other bank zones. Thank you so much in advance. All right, so if we have a large project, so let's say in this folder here, I have added like 200 tracks of audio. Okay, so if you need to go, for, by hitting a button to go to track 100 or track 150 and have the mix console kind of navigate over to like, we'll call it like particular markers so that we can navigate easier. So what I did to help with this situation so that it could be recalled from a keyboard shortcut is I just went into the project logical editor and you could say, okay, let's go to setup, and I did just a preset here that we're going to say select container type is equal to a track, the name contains, let's say 75. Now, if you have a huge template, you could actually just, select a folder track, select an actual track name. I don't have all of my audio tracks, my 200 tracks I created here for demonstration purposes. I didn't name them all, but you could kind of use markers. Maybe if I'm doing brass instruments, I want to go to percussion, I want to go to different ones. So at this point, I just said, let's do one for track 75 and one for track 125 so I could navigate. All right, so I save these as presets. So within my, so once I'm over here, we could just say, okay, we want to, let me just say we want to go to 100. And then we could save this as, save the changes as a preset. So now what I'm going to do is just use your Touch OC device. I'll show it with a MIDI remote. So let's say I'll pull up my trusty piano control. So I want to take this button here and let's assign it. We'll come over here to key commands. Let's get to, I'm just going to say 75. Okay, so we'll say select track 75. I'm going to apply the mapping for that particular one. Let's come over here to 125. So once it's saved as the preset, right? So I'm going to hit the button here and we're going to apply that mapping. Okay, so let's go to my mixer. I'll open up my full screen mixer here. We're at track 1. I'm gonna hit the button and now track 75 is selected and we see that the mixer is automatically moved over. Or we could say, let's go to track 125. So at this point we could immediately select the track and that would navigate the mix console over. Now, if we are working with different groups, like, so let's say it's an orchestral thing, whether it's instruments or audio. So let's say, okay, this is going to be my orchestral percussion. So I could come over, I'm going to make a folder with group track. Call this percussion. Right, let's here say, okay, this 20 tracks are going to be brass. Here's that's right. So now if we pull up our logical editor, I will come over. So let's say we'll go back to our mix console. Let's go back to like track 1. So that's my currently selected track. So again, I can come over to my project logical editor preset. So to navigate setup, we want to select container type, name contains, and we can say track. And let's just come over here. So let's say, okay, let's do brass. Then I come right over there. We've now selected. I'd have to set it as a track. Let me So, but you could just name it by folders as well. But that's how you could quickly navigate, is just, come over to your project logical editor preset, or go to your project logical editor. And once we have this set up, then you could just have it navigate to a particular track, and you could have different tracks as kind of bookmarkers. Jump back, see if we have more live questions. Okay, so we see from Gropia 66 says, I'm a sound surfer, need to be able to change BI is constantly, I probably just have to get used to it or not. Love Cubase. Thanks again, Greg. If you're constantly like switching back and forth between different virtual instruments that you may have, so let's say if you come over to like just your VST instrument rack, like you say, okay, I want this to go to, retro log instead, then you could just come over there, and really this is kind of following more kind of like MIDI is going out to the destination. So I think you'll get used to it, but I'll pass it along as to the team as well. Thanks for sharing your workflow with us. All right, DJ Showcase says, hi Greg, question. When exporting audio, after export, I want opt to create an audio track. Is there an easy way to have a created track automatically bypass the plugins on the master bus? So let's see if, all right, so when we do like an export audio mix down, generally, let's see if I could switch it to a Q mix for you. You maybe have to do it through a macro, but let me just open up a project and we'll do. So let me just see if I could. All right, so I'm going to do a quick export audio mix down. Let's say I'm going to put something nasty like a flanger on our master bus here. Open this up. We'll hop over here. So it's something really obvious. Great. So we'll have our flanger. All right. So in case you don't know, okay. So when we do this, if we wanted to export, do create an audio track if you're not familiar with it, just in case. And for the benefit of others, I'll say let's do our export audio mix down. And after export, I'm going to choose to create an audio track. Great. And let's say I'm just going to call it mix down here. Okay, so we're going to export our audio. It's going to, as it exports, it's now making a new track here that is our exported audio mix down. All right, but now when we play this track is going through. It's going through the flangers again, which is probably not what we want. So let me see if I could change this. See if we could. So let's go to our logical editor. Maybe I'll do this as a macro using logical editor step. So I want to take the selected track. Say our container type is track, and see our track operation, connect output. no bus. Okay. Okay, so right now this is going to our stereo out. If I did this right. All right, so now this track isn't going to our main output. Okay, and let's see. So a lot of times what I do is I will have, as part of the control room, so in my audio connections, I'm going to come over here. Let's do our control room, and I have, let's say, one of our we'll call it a Q mix, and I'll call this our Q mix. I'll call it reference. Okay. So let's see. So right now, I want to send this to the control room, and I now want to see if I could take this track. So if I could do it with a key command. So I'm going to come here to we open this up. See if I could do this. All right. So it doesn't seem like we could turn it on. Let me see if I could do it with the MIDI remote. Control room. Back to okay. So what? Don't think I could All right, so we could do the export, and I could set up the project logical editor to turn this to no bus. But at this point, I could just turn on my Qmix 4. And then as we are playing, here's our Qmix 4. And let's say here's our normal mix. Everything should be going out of, let's see if I changed everything to no bus. All right. Yeah, I do the selected track. Wait, do this one more time here. Convert this. All right, so it's not a totally automated process, but what you could do, again, I will do our export audio mix down. I want to change the project logical editor preset to modify it just a little bit. We'll say route to no bus, and we'll say that the property is that the track is selected. Okay, so let's export audio mix down. Great. And let me that and select the opt-out, sorry. So audio mix down, we'll do create an audio track, or audio. All right, so we have this track. So we could just change this track here to no bus. And then as we open up our, let's say our Q sends here, just turn on to the reference Q send. Just put the flanger on, sorry. All right, so let's get to your mix console. Flanger. So what we're going to do is send it through a Qmix. All right, so once we have this event, we could send it to no bus, but I'm going to come right over here, send it to no bus. And then when we go to the channel, we could just activate it going into our reference. And this is a Qmix. So now the only thing we're hearing is our Qmix here. So if I go to my mix here where all the other tracks are playing, and I'm going to put another plugin on, we could say, let's just come over here, say the chopper plugin. All right, so we'll just make this. So now I can listen to my mix down file without going through the master processing. So we're basically sending this out to no bus, but in the Qmix, and we could do it directly from our setup sections here. Let's go to our Q sends. So right now we could just come over here. we go back to our mix where we have the chopper plugin. So we can see that this track isn't being processed by that plugin. So try to send it to, just take your mix down, send it to no bus, have a control room. You don't have to have physical outputs route it. Just make a Q mix here, route that track to the Q mix, and then that is not going through the Master Effects processing. So we can hear the Master Effects processing here with this. So now the only thing going through QMix 4 is the export, and that isn't being processed through the Master Effects chain. Sorry, it took me a while to get there, but hopefully it's helpful. Okay. Mento says he got a grant from the Arts Council and built his own videotape. Sounds like fun. All right, so we see a question. I used to modulate sample start time of hi-hats in Ableton. How to do that in Cubase drum machine with modulators. Okay, let's do that. Add a drum machine track. All right, so let's come over to, let's put in. All right, so let's see if we need to modulate it in the drum machine. So let's come here. So let's see if we throw in a sample. Not sure because we're doing it with synthesis there, but let's look into here as well. All right, so let's say we want to do offset in ticks here. Okay, so we have it just for, let's say, our hi-hats. So let's come over here to modulators. And let's go back to, let's see if we can modulate the pattern editor. Alright, so we could see if I could adjust. Right, so we could modulate the instrument. Do this for the synthesis part. Let me try just a sample. All right, if this is great, so let me come over to modulator. See if drum machine, if so we could adjust our sample position here, but I'm not sure if it's seeing it as a modulatable source in the drum machine. So let me just go back to the modulators. We try in the drum machine here. All right, so get to the modulators and see if we could find it in the source. Doesn't look like, let's see if we could define that as an automation source. Drum machine. Make sure. Doesn't look like the sample start is automatable. The modulators, so here, good to select. All right, so let's see if we could assign it as a modulatable source. I could come over here and adjust like the reverb, but I don't think the sample start time. See if way to get in. Yeah, I don't think that the drum machine is going to allow us to automate the sample start time. I could play around with it some more between now and Friday to see if I could figure out how to do it. It doesn't seem like that's an automatable parameter for that's available for modulation. Sorry about that. I see. Think if I could just do it on a particular MIDI note. Let me know if you always want it in a pattern or if you want it to be random. Well, maybe if it's on its own, if it's always going to be random, we might be able to something, but take a look. Sorry about that. All right, Jackie Barr asks, what is the main difference between Groove Agent SE and Cubase's drum machine? I'm wanting to find a professional loop I like and load it and swap out the kit to have the sounds I want on each pad. So I don't think that we could do sliced audio in the drum machine. So the drum machine is going to be kind of a hybrid sample-based and synthesis-based. So, when we come over to load up, a drum, we could load up different kick drums. At this point, we could just say, as we would trigger, we could do full synthesis on it. So if we want to be able to, and if you want to, so, where that's not sample based, but if you wanting to work kind of with a drum loop and slice it up and replay sounds, probably Groove Agent be better for that. So let's take a look. So we have a loop here, Groove Agent. Over, let's say we have our drum loop here, all right, and we like this particular drum sound, so we will come over to Groove Agent. I'll cut it. All right, so I'm going to drag this sample into Groove Agent. Okay. So now as we would play our sample here. All right, so we're playing the loop. Now we want to be able to replace. So we would go to the main area here. So and then on this tab, so we say edit to slice. And we'll create the slices. So as it's done this, it's created a pattern. So we could just play this pattern. All right, now if we wanted to replace the individual sounds, so let's say the first kick, I wanted a different sample. I'll just come over, kick. All right, so I'm going to drag that over. So now when we play this back, and play the player pattern. And let's say I want to find a different snare. All right, so I will come over here to the kit. All right, and now I could just come over, just replace. So let's find in our kick. Replace it. So we're taking kind of the feel from the pattern and replacing samples very easily with that. So Groove Agent is going to be a better tool for slicing and replacing different samples than the drum machine. And if you wanted to do synthesis, or if you want to do more authentic like 808s and more drum synthesizer stuff, then the drum machine is probably a better tool for that. Okay, so 54-beat music says I'm trying to create a workspace that show the pattern editor in full windows, media bay, full window, and drum machine. When I create drum machine, it doesn't show in workspace. Please help. Okay, so let's say we want all media bay. Hit this Okay, so it's a full Windows Media Bay, full window and drum machine, but when I create drum machine, doesn't go in Workplace. All right, so let's say if we're doing a full Media Bay, so it could depend on like what you have set to always on top. So let me over here, let's open up drum machine. Okay, so let's say I'm just going to have this set up. And save this as a workspace for now. I close these windows. Windows still open. Save the workspace with just drum machine if that's recalled. Drum machine included in a workspace. So let's come over here. Okay, and let's see if I recall this, if the workspace recalls the drum machine in the lower window, if this switches to the drum machine, may not be recalling it if it's docked, but so you see the drum machine might be going by default to the lower window. Think that there's a preference for that, so I'll pass that along because it doesn't seem like it seems like it's by default going into the lower zone when it's recalled, as opposed to a floating window. So I'll make a note of that and pass it on to the team. Sorry about that. Okay, we have a question. How do I troubleshoot MIDI activity? I have MIDI activity all the time. I have multiple MIDI controllers, Stream Deck, and I Mark III S61 X Touch 1 have constant activity on a Cubase meter without send. Some controllers may be constantly sending, like I have activity going on here. Some controllers will send MIDI active sensing information so that as you're working with active sensing, that MIDI data is being transmitted by the controller. If you want to isolate it, you could, if you come over here, you could just say, okay, like on, so when I turn off my CC121, we'll see that the constant kind of MIDI activity goes away. I'm just going to turn it on, not going to touch anything, but this is sending MIDI active sensing. It's almost like a handshake saying, hey, I'm here. Hey, I'm here. Hey, I'm here. Pay attention, So it's just kind of a particular MIDI message that is probably being transmitted by one of your devices. You could see often it's not going to show up as in a MIDI monitor, but it could be, maybe one of your controllers is probably sending MIDI active sensing. So there could be settings on my CC121. I don't think that there's a setting for it to disable it, but there may be settings to disable it on within a MIDI controller to turn that off. But generally, it's not. I know it could be visually annoying, but it's, check to see, if you don't see anything, if you see the constant MIDI activity and we have, let's say, a MIDI track and we've gone to the MIDI inserts, and the MIDI inserts will now, if we go to the MIDI monitor, if you don't see anything coming in, then it's going to be MIDI active sensing probably. So one of those controllers is probably just spitting out that information. Cubase is recognizing it, and that's probably what it's showing. So if it looks something like that, then it's probably active sensing. If you're not seeing anything in the MIDI monitor, I don't think that there's a way to turn off MIDI active sensing from being received here, but it's just kind of, but some MIDI interfaces will automatically kind of transmit that. So in Cubase is just showing that it's seeing MIDI activity. And you could unplug each device and see if, narrow it down to one particular controller as well. Mr. John A. Walker says, hope everyone's well. You just released Left Hand Conspiracy. Congratulations on your release. Well, Teams is saying he's left-handed. It is a conspiracy. Chatfield jumped to me. All right, so DB Music Productions 9181 says, would love to create a key command to toggle open, close, lower zone, MIDI editor, in this case, in a separate window. I can't find this. All right, so I think it's going to be, let's get to our key commands here. It's like maybe Windows zones or something like that. Windows zones, so let's say not. Okay, so if we come over here, we could say, try this, open in separate window / lower zone. Okay, so under editors, try open. We can open the key editor in the lower zone. Let's see what this one does here. So. Yeah. All right, so once I have this event selected, so you may have to have this as the active window, but come over to your key commands and you'll see open in separate window lower zone. So I'll set it up for my MIDI remote as well. Over here to the MIDI remote. Open in separate window / lower zone. Right, so now when I'm here, let's say I'm in my MIDI editor, so this is the active window, just toggle back and forth. Again, that function, if you go to the key commands, that's where you want to set it, is open in separate window / lower zone, and that will just toggle back and forth. If you're in the project window, may not work. This may have to be the window and focus the lower zone to kind of start and initiate that process. So let me know if that helps, DB Music Productions. All right. Music Productions, also kind of get the same advice from Jazz Dude. That last topic. Okay, so you see, how is it possible to run Cubase on 2 different drivers? I'm a Windows user. Yesterday I wasn't able to use Opto Drive and SSL2 interface. So, generally there's no way for your 2 interfaces to, not sure what the Opto Drive is. Let me just take a quick look. If that's 2. Yeah, if it's an audio interface, generally you can't run more than one interface, and the reason why is because the 2 audio interfaces aren't synchronized to each other. So there's no way, if you're playing audio out of one, you're recording audio in, it's almost, they could be out of sync with each other, which is a bad thing in digital audio workstations like Cubase. You could make the analogy of, you're on top of a hill and you have 2 basketballs and you roll them down and you think that you rolled them with the same amount of force and pressure down the hill, and as you do that, you realize that the basketballs aren't going to be at the same, are going to get to the hill, the bottom of the hill, probably at different times. And that's kind of what your audio is doing. What some people may do is, you could run kind of like a generic ASIO for all, or on Mac OS, you could, sometimes use what they call aggregate devices, but the 2 different audio streams going out of one interface and the other interface are never in sync with each other. So if you record or do editing, there's no way to have kind of a constant clock for the different audio interfaces. So that's why most programs, you don't really utilize 2 interfaces simultaneous, 2 different interfaces. Some interfaces will allow you to expand and can do that, or if it has a digital audio connection or a word clock connection, the 2 interfaces can be synchronized, but it's often rare. All right, Steve Green, great to see you on, says, Greg, if I leave one song track that has been unmixed in spectral layers, untouched, not bounced, etc., when I place all the tracks in musical mode for spectral layers tracks, jump to the beginning of the song. It says I place all the tracks in musical mode. The spectator's tracks jump to the beginning of the song. All right, so I think that if you're unmixing, so let me just open up a track real quick. All right, so let's take an unmixed track here. For a project that's already mixed. Okay, I'll just unmix one here. Okay, here. All right, let me just do a quick song here. Sorry about that. Make it shorter for time's sake. All right, so I'm going to do just a quick tempo detection of this file.
Let me let you know what I'm about and what is it.
All right, so I'm going to do tempo detection before, then we'll do musical mode. So let's here, the track.
What is outside in the cold? I walk alone to my own.
All right, so we have our tempo detection. Now I'm going to do a quick unmixing. Spectral layers. Okay, and then we'll test to see. Okay, so it says when I place all tracks in musical mode, the spectral layers tracks jump to the beginning of the. Got done with this. Okay, so
Let you know what I'm about. What is outside in the my own beat. Tell you lies.
okay, so I'm gonna place this into musical mode here, just this particular track. Let me just throw another loop in along with this. Okay, so let's say we.
Let me let you know what I'm about and what is.
I'm gonna place these into musical mode here for that track.
Let me let you know what I'm about. Let me let you know what I'm about and what.
All right, and I'm gonna. So it says when I place all tracks in musical mode, spectral layers tracks jump to the beginning of the song. All right, so let's say these tracks, I'm not sure if the tracks are in musical, so let's say these tracks are in musical mode.
Let me tell you lies about myself.
But doesn't seem like it's when I place all tracks in musical mode, spectral layers tracks jump to the beginning of the
Let
song.
you know what I'm about and
It seems like if I'm here,
about myself.
it's
Don't you know you
the unmixed song is still
I walk alone to my
playing from wherever it is.
graduated.
I'll leave this open, but let me know if it's, something else. Let's say I just want to take the.
Last September I'm about and what is in, what is outside.
So if we take these tracks and again make this into musical mode here.
Let me let you know what I'm about and what is in, what is outside in the cold. I walk alone.
All right, so I'll mute the drums here. So I'm just going to play this drum loop. Let's go back to spectral layers and mute the drums in the original track.
Let you know what is outside in the cold. I walk alone.
But when I start in the middle, it seems fine. Doesn't seem to be jumping. And then if we bring the drums in, but that seems to kind of be working as expected. I'll leave this open so I don't have to redo the unmixing again. So let me know if I'm misunderstanding, Steve. All right, so you see 54 Beatmaker says it's okay if we can't automate sample start yet. Don't. Says, do you understand drum machines first generation? So looking forward to more crazy updates from the drum machine in the future. You see Jazzy says just use negative track delay and randomize it. So let's give that a shot. Project. So if the So let's see if we could just randomize. So if we have, like, let's say we have that hi-hat pattern playing. If the event is in, in the track, so let's say if I have this pattern here, ultimately come to, let's say, our pattern editor. If I drag the pattern into my timeline, we could probably randomize like the F#1 notes here. So if we wanted to, at this point, it's not modulated, but we could go to like your MIDI logical editor and say we want to take their subtype is equal to F#1. Say MIDI note. They are. And then we could say just take its position, or I could actually, let's do a different. So let's go to our transformer plugin. So type is equal to note, and let's say our pitch. So wanted to, this way we could just do and now what we want to do, it's not going to allow us to do that in real time, but if go back to our MIDI logical editor, sorry about that. So let's go to like our position, and then we could set to random values, let's say between -30, 30. So as I do this, we could play. Then you could also just come over here and randomize your velocity. So we could say like minus 10 and 10. So you could, again, just kind of come over here. Let's back to originally. And then if you wanted to just randomize the values, you could do that. It's not modulating it all the time, but if it doesn't have to be the same, be different every single time, that you could just come over here and choose to change the position using the logical editors. All right, so you see DB Music Production says, okay, I see the command is to show a hide the lower zone, but I want it to open in a new window, looking it up now. So if you want this to always open, not in the lower zone, but in a separate window, it's just a preference. So let's go to your settings or preferences. And under editors, we can say double click opens editor in a window. So now that we hit apply, so again, preferences or settings to editors, double click opens editor in a window. So now when let's say I have my mix console here, I double click on this event. It's now open in a separate window. Again, if you just want that to be the default state, preferences or settings, the preferences on Windows platform from the bottom of the edit menu, editors, double click opens window. So let me know if that's helpful for you. DB Music Productions. All right, David Surmier says hello. Thanks for joining us today, being part of the community. So you see, hi Greg, on my Windows 11 system, I just get the no entry sign from Windows and unable to drop file. If you get the time this week, could you check on your Windows systems? Yours? Yeah, I tried on my Windows system, but check to see if some drag and drop operations could be affected if you're running the program as administrator or not. So try to see if you run the program as administrator or if you toggle that setting, if that makes a difference for you, John. Yeah, I did try it on my Windows 11 system without any problem. All right, Bratman Studio says, hey, Greg, I know Tim W got the CC1 slider with buttons. What exactly is that for? So you can think of it as like a little MIDI control surface. So it kind of combines it's a Yamaha device. So it combines like a basic channel strip where you're going to have the fader. You'll have, your transport controls. You have a really nice kind of handy wheel for navigation and for editing tasks. But also you get like 12 Stream Deck buttons that you could configure. So there's different presets that come with Cubase, but there's 12 different kind of user definable buttons. And when you change it in like the Stream Deck software, it could be labeled so that you could, I want this to open up the mixer. I want to do this function. I want to quantize, that you could have your favorite user commands that are available for you. So, and I think that the fader on it feels great. I don't have one anymore. Steinberg per That field jumped. Okay, so back to where I was. All right, we see Randy Lee Music on. Great to see you on. Hope you're doing well. All right, so we see regarding the MIDI monitor, I noticed that an expression pedal was sending a lot of activity. If it's not going to affect anything, I'll leave it. So it could affect, so depending on the instruments, but you may notice that as you're recording, so sometimes if a pedal is not fully engaged either ways, it may be, or if the pedal is starting to malfunction, you may notice that as you're working with it, if it's spitting out data, some instruments will respond to expression data. So if you're doing a lot of virtual instruments, you may get unwanted data that could be changing how the parts sound. Some instruments will respond to expression data. It's more kind of in orchestral. If you wanted Cubase to filter it out, so you could on a controller make sure you could probably tell your MIDI controller that the expression do not transmit MIDI expression. If that's not a possibility, if you go to your settings here, we could say, let's go to your MIDI filter, and we could say we want to control like your MIDI controller, and we could say, okay, what controller do I want to control? I could say, let's filter out expression. So at this point, we could say, let's add CC11 expression, and then Cubase will be filtering it out for you. But I would try to solve it at the source, because sometimes when you're doing editing, if you go into like the list editor, which isn't as common these days, but when you go into the list editor, you may notice that, you have, thousands of MIDI messages for 6 notes. And, it's much better than it used to be. Like, with virtual instruments, it's not as critical. Sometimes, in the old days when we were using hardware MIDI, that could often be that could often just clog up your entire MIDI data stream. So sometimes, that would be a problem. In the old days, like when Roland D50s were very, very popular, keyboard people would use it as a controller, and they would record some parts. So just to give you an example here. So let's say I come over to this, and they were just kind of playing simple chords along the lines of this, where it's like, okay, we're here, chord. So, and if they press the keys down after, all right, so it looks like we have, just some, a couple of chords here, but, really what's in the event is if we go to our list editor, we could see, okay, we got like these notes, that's one chord, and all these aftertouch messages. So sometimes, it could lead to problems down the road. So you could filter it out, or see, sometimes readjusting your expression pedal position may stop it. But it could be a sign that the expression pedal is starting to go bad and malfunctioning. So you could filter it from the MIDI controller, or have Cubase filter it for you as well. But I would tend to try to fix the problem so that it's not actually, won't have an effect if I copy it to a different instrument. All right, so we see from the Phil B. Says, when dragging sample loops does not always align automatically with a grid, even if I'm in musical mode. Happens even with Cubase sample packs. Using the manual stretch, the burden. All right, so the grid is not going to be the same as musical mode. So they're kind of related, but a bit different. So let's come over here we'll just find some drum loops. Great. Sorry about that. Let me just... All right, so all right. All right, so let's say I have a drum loop here. All right, so when we have snap turned on, all right, and you could turn snap on with the letter J on your computer keyboard. All right, so let's say I want my snap. So when I have snap turned on, I can drag the event and then it's going to snap to the grid. But we don't necessarily snap to the tempo. So when snap is going to be based on the grid. So right now I have my snap set to the beat. I could have it set to bar as well. So if I want to come here, now when I drag the event on the timeline, it's only going to allow me to snap the position to the bar. So, but it may not be in musical mode. So it may not be synchronized. So where the event starts can be synchronized to the grid. But when we play it, let's say I turn on my metronome. That tempo isn't aligned with the event. So when doing this with events, if I want to listen to this drum loop in musical mode, I would click on this little icon here. So now when I drag this in, this would place it into what we call musical mode here. So I would just enable musical mode. So instead of manually stretching, we would just place this again in musical mode. Then that's going to fit timing wise. So musical mode will fit the timing, but the snap will snap the event, the start of the event to the grid. So again, musical mode is going to be separate than snap. So I could have my snap turned off and I could place it here. It's going to play back in the tempo to match the tempo of the project. But those two working together when I come here. So snap, and again, it's the letter J, will snap the beginning of the event. To get the event to fit in, that's when we use musical mode. So let me know if that makes sense. All right. So we see from DB Music Productions says sometimes I've had volume in VST suddenly go very low without anything I could find that is in contact in Spitfire's players. I thought maybe the MIDI activity might be causing that. So your MIDI activity for expression could be causing that. So a lot of sample instruments will base their dynamics on the expression, on MIDI CC11. So there's a good chance that if you have, unexpected volume changes, that your expression pedal could be, could have that effect for you. Okay, so we see from DB Music Production says, thank you for the window find. I'm there and working on it. We'll find a right solution. Best. So glad to help. All right, great to see Michael Marshall joining from Somerset in the UK. Thanks for being online with us. All right, so we see just from DB Music Production says, you're right, the lower zone needs to be the active zone, kind of defeats the idea of a shortcut. Trying to create a hotkey, not a mouse click. So I think, once you have that preference set, that you should be all set. All right, we see the Jazz Dude's got an Apple MacBook Neo. So you find this as Mac for MIDI and runs both. Maybe VST System Link works, correct? The VST System Link will work, but you're going to need to have a digital audio connection on both audio interfaces. So this is my idea is run the DAW in the Mac for MIDI and Omnisphere for the Neo laptop in the live environment. Yeah, so if you're if you're just sending MIDI out to it, you could send MIDI out from one interface or from one MIDI interface to another. So you probably don't, I'm not sure if you need to synchronize Omnisphere or if you're just kind of playing sounds out in a live environment. But if you have the MIDI and if your MIDI is synced in your M4, and then it's being sent out to the Neo hosting Omnisphere, you should be fine. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on. I thought your guitar picks looked really cool, Gareth. Nice modifications there. Thanks for sharing them. Gareth is saying that Jazz Dude is now the Mac Daddy. And Uno Momento wants everyone to hit the like button. Jazz Dude's also ordered a new hardware synth to combine it all. Got a Grind by Behringer. Yeah. Tim K is just mentioning, it says he toggles the windows while his Arturia Keylab 3 in Cubase mode. Pads 1, 2, and 3 are mapped by default. All right, so we see from DB Music Production with the kind words says, please never go away. You're the best. I was working on a spreadsheet troubleshoot until I realized what time it was so that I could get my Cubase troubleshooting answered to your treasure, Greg. So I'm too lazy to apply for another job. So I've been representing Steinberg for 34 years and just actually started with the company officially after all these years. I always worked for the United States distributor. So I'm looking forward to retiring from Steinberg many years in the future. But thank you for the kind words. All right, so we see from DaVinci Girl, it says, for consumers, 2 interfaces are rare, right? It says, but Dante or MADI interfaces, its usual biggest problem is latency and just 3-meter USB line for interface. Yeah, so, I mean, it's a lot of people want a Dante or MADI system, like, especially when you get into a MADI system, a MADI system or like a Dante system especially is designed where, multiple companies can all, connect into the network, and the network is handling the clocking, and MADI, the protocol, is handling the clocking. So there is a centralized audio clock so that all of the items can get sent out and received with a known clock. So that's, so if you wanted a lot of flexibility, You might feel like if you're an audio person who's not very IT savvy, you may feel like, oh, suddenly I'm an audio engineer turned into a network engineer. Um, you know, that could be like one perception, but in live, like live professional sound, like for concerts, it's very common that, like I was seeing a concert not too long ago, and then like when you're, the front of house is being sent into the green room as well in the venue. If you go into the restroom, they have audio being piped into the restroom. So they have like, multiple distribution points. So the audio is not just the front speakers. So with Dante, you could have, just using standard computer Ethernet cables that can handle, a tremendous amount of audio that could be distributed to many different sources. It's not as widely used in the studio because, most studios will have typical, wiring and multi-pin, connectors. But if, for a studio, let's say if you had like, 3 or 4 rooms and you wanted to record from one room into another room, a Dante network is really good for that. But obviously the entry point for Dante means that it's going to be more professional because it is significantly more expensive than a USB. But the USB interface, while it's, they all sound, really good these days in comparison to, decades ago. You can get amazing sound, but you don't get the flexibility of being able to daisy chain multiple like USB interfaces together easily for the most part. Most of them lack digital audio connections as well, so the clocks can't be synchronized. It's just an analog only device. Here it says, "Come to the Mac side to let the ARM chip flow through." You could also get ARM chip Windows as well. Gareth is having an exciting day for tomorrow. So Gareth, I'm just curious how the wish your daughter a happy belated birthday for us from everyone on the live stream, and hope you enjoyed the eclipse. The music says he's turned to a crisp here in Dallas area. All right, so we have a question. Would Cubase feel comfortable coming from Pro Tools? Yeah, we've had tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people who switched to Cubase from Pro Tools. I think one of the things that you'll notice is that Steinberg is probably the most innovative company. I think that the feature sets that we see in other programs, like I'm always every time I see new release notes from other programs, it's always like it's like, oh, we've only had that feature for 25 years and they just got around to kind of copying it and doing not such a great job at it. So I think I think that you'll find the MIDI is very, very strong. The audio is also incredibly strong, and a lot of stuff that you would need third-party solutions for that you kind of get used to. Lots of investments that may not be updated in synchronicity with your host application, that when they're all in the host application, you don't have to worry about those types of aspects. Sorry, the chat field jumped. Okay. All right, so we see Soren. This is Greg. I've imported audio files a couple times now. It seems I mess up. I can't import them to individual tracks. They all wind up on the same track. How's the easiest way to import 5 tracks? All right, there's a new preference. This came out in 15, I think. But if you go to, let's say, your preferences or settings, and we go to editing, I think it's under editing audio. You could say import files to one track or turn that off. So if I, all right, so try to come here to editing audio. And then if you have this, you could choose to open options dialog. If you have that, you'll see like a little check, but I'm going to say use settings. And then I'm going to uncheck import files on one track. So come over, I will, so let me import multiple audio files. And I want these to go on separate tracks. And now they're all on separate tracks with that same preference turned on. Again, editing audio on import audio files. I will go to import. And now they're all going to be on the same track. Right across. So, and also when you go to, drag files over, same behavior. And check out that preference. Turn that off. And you'll be happy and realize that you're one mouse click away from happiness. Okay, just saying that we don't have to use decimal points for outside air. Still a tricky formula going from Celsius to Fahrenheit. Probably better at it now, Tim, after all these years. Silly Americans using. All right, DJ Showcase is a question. Is there a way to assign each cue mix from the control room to a stream deck? I know you can toggle through each mix, but I would like to jump cue mix by push on one button. I think you might be toggle, but let's see. And let's see if it mentions if you're doing MIDI remote or not. All right. So let's see if we come over here to our control room. So all right, so here's select source Q1, 2, 3, 4 is in the main area. So I'm not sure if you're using your Stream Deck as a MIDI remote or not, but let me just assign buttons here. All right, let's get to the control room. So you doesn't toggle on. I may have to adjust that, but it looks like we can do it from the MIDI remote settings. This at the top. Yeah, so if you leave it on toggle, then the MIDI remote would allow you to do that. So you select source Q1 on MIDI remote. You don't have to toggle. Let's see if that's available in the keyboard shortcuts. Preferences. Window, sorry. Yes, it doesn't look like it's a keyboard shortcut, but it looks like we can do it from the control room area under the main tab for the MIDI remote. So let me know if you're doing that, and there is like a little utility you get for your Stream Deck to actually just transmit MIDI. All right, CG Lealgo says, how do I display scales when entering notes? Right, so let's say if you want notes to only fit within a scale, so all right, there's a couple of ways. So let's say I want to chord track. Okay, so if I look at, let's say I have my piano part here. All right, so if I'm here, we could say there's two different ways to do it. One is I could go to my project menu and we go to our chord track and we can say create chord events. That will automatically populate a chord track for us. That chord track, if we click on this icon, can show the scale, so we can see what scale we are in here. Within the MIDI editor, we also have a scale assistant where we could use the chord track but we could also set the editor scale. And if you want to, so if at this point we could say, okay, now we could set our scale directly here. And, we could just use the scale assistant. Now, once we have this scale assistant set correctly here, and it could actually give us scale suggestions looking at the part. So say, okay, it's C major. But we could also do snap pitch editing. And what snap pitch editing could allow us to do is, as we're editing a note here, so let's say, okay, we're the D note, I can't move it to an E flat because that's not in the scale. But if I turn this off, I can freely move this note to any pitch that I want. When this note is in snap pitch editing is on, then I could only snap to the particular scale, notes within the scale that was determined. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do. So, entering notes doesn't display a scale because the scale is kind of derived from a series of notes, but you could take a MIDI part, have it determine the scale in a chord track or in the scale assistant, and we could choose to use a chord track or the scale assistant and do snap. And if we only want to show the notes that are in the scale, we could go up to this little icon here, this filter, and we could say show pitches only from the scale assistant. So at that point, we could show pitches only that fit the particular scale. Or if you wanted to see all pitches, so you could have that button just kind of do the pitch visibility. Let me know if that's helpful for you. Your comments. All right, so you see 54 beat makers as hey Greg just figured out how we can modulate sample start sampler track through select designation parameters. So there might be, I'll do some research on it, but you might be able to do something similar. In the, let me just see if I can find that in the sampler track. Check. Yeah, so select designation. So there's a good chance that if you could do it in the sampler track that you could do it inside of Cubase as well. But if you want to give me a hint, I'd be happy to take that hint from you, but I'll search. Well, thanks for letting me know. I'll do some more work on that. Discussion of Muppets. Just asking Muppet. Good. They're saying Greg is Steinberg. I just do a small part being able to help people. Like really, really dedicated people to come up with amazing solutions. Proud to be working the same company. Michael Teams is kind enough to pass on 1 gallon of golden opulence. Great flavor. So Gareth just saying the eclipse was incredible. Nothing like any video or image I've ever seen. Great way to bring in his daughter's 18th birthday. Okay. Great. I'm glad you got to witness that. All right, we see Gerald Ely joining from Martinez, California. See Tim Weinheimer just mentioning there's a cool video on YouTube going through the history of VST from Hamburg with Love, the history of Steinberg. Cool video. So yeah, I enjoyed watching that. Usually I watch those, I'm like, no, you got that wrong. Oh, you got that wrong. But the guy did a really good job of the history. It's been. I remember, I always remember kind of, reading the facts of what was going to happen with VST, like, maybe a month before it was out as kind of a secretive project. So incredibly exciting. A fun video to watch. I did a wonderful job. All right, so we see John Barry just says, just looked at drag and drop problems with Windows 11 to list multi-monitor and touchscreen settings as causes. Search on that. Vinci Girl says Cubase, most innovative company, yes, but in professional setup, you need backwards compatibility. Here they invest, special in Germany. History is very important. Electronics products. So, I mean, we still, actively load up our projects from 25 years ago. Not a lot of companies can say that. And I could still download programs, so I could download, import open projects from my Atari computer on a floppy disk, 36 years after buying that. It's still available. So I think Steinberg, does a lot of backward compatibility, but, a lot of computers and operating systems choose not to. So Da Vinci Girl says, by the way, the Neve SSL from Air Studios did arrive well in. Just asking says, thank you, Greg, Jazzy, and everybody else. CG Lago just says, so much. Welcome. See, Jazzy Lamel says, greetings, Greg. How do I go about using the live stream index to find past topics that were discussed? All right, and I have, just if anyone wants it, I have like a Word document with all of the index. It's like almost 1,000 pages long. But and I'm happy to share that with anyone that wants to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. I know Rob Schmedeke, he asks for it like every couple months, just as a reference. I'm happy to share that. But if you want to look at cubaseindex.com. All right, so you see huge Q&A database. You can say, okay, let's go to 2025. All right, and here you could just say, oh, I'm looking for VCA. So I'm going to just do like Control or Command plus the letter F. And let's go to VCA, right? And then we could find, okay, how to apply a VCA fader to selected tracks. Click there, and then you can just navigate directly to that particular video. So, but again, anyone that wants a Word document of the, I believe it's also just like within like the last month, it's available on the Discord, the Cubase Nation Discord. I sent that over to Jazz Dude. Pretty sure I did. But if not, anyone could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, and I'm happy to share the document for everyone. But try just, again, going to cubaseindex.com, and then you could just search there. Just asking says he's gaining too much weight from the screen. All right, so Garrett just says, hope you had a chance to witness an eclipse too. So it was when we had our the last solar eclipse we had here was actually kind of a very cloudy day, ironically. So didn't quite have the same impact. I think my son, where he was at school, wasn't as cloudy, so they had glasses. Garrett says there's one in 2017. So yeah, we had a partial where I was. But hopefully the next one I'll be able to time it so I could see. Right. Jay the Jolly says, are there any alternatives to the Korg Nano Control 2 that will work native with Cubase the same way? Microsoft forced an update to turn my Nano Control of death machine. I'd even paused updates. So there's, I would check out, there's a lot of other little controllers, and sometimes every Cubase release, there are some new MIDI remote scripts. But they're pretty easy to make too. So a lot of times there's kind of a user MIDI remote area. If you go look on the Steinberg forums, it's like a repository of different MIDI scripts that people have made and shared. So, there's lots of different ones available. So depending on like what your price range is, if you need, if you want it as part of your MIDI controller or something, something that's a small form factor like the Nano Control, I think that Behringer may have something that's similar kind of footprint that, as long as it's spitting MIDI out, should be fine. So I could do some research if you let me know if you're just kind of looking for like a Nano Control equivalent. Mine seems to be working fine in my Windows 11 after doing like the the Windows 11 MIDI services update. Yeah, we see Jess Askin says he's thinking of trying to repurpose his old Behringer BCF and BCR 2000 devices for. Gareth just says well said about the compatibility, Greg. So, thank you. Yeah, so Jazzy is mentioning that the Word doc is download. All right, so you see DaVinci Girl says you offer products I bought not for VST2, but just for VST3. Not a big task offered free instruments for VST2. My hardware is history purposes, not able to use VST. Help me. German TV will lose their archive. So I think that the old VST2 versions are available, but everyone wanted them in VST3. So if you have older versions of Cubase, so let's say if you have Cubase SX9, that license works back to Cubase SX1, and you could just download those. But let's just check. Look. If you go to unsupported software. So Model E, LM4, these are still available. If you had a license for them for compatibility, they're still available. Studio case that that had a lot of the virtual instruments that you saw. So if so a lot of these are still available in VST2. So Neon was always part of, but if you go to like earlier Cubase versions, it was never sold separately. You could go back to Cubase VST5. You could download that. Cubase SX. So there's all these earlier versions are still available for you to download. So and those plugins, if they're installed, will work for you. Okay. Janie Elson says hi, Jan or Jan from Denmark, using Cubase 13 Pro. A little late in here, I can see. So I'm just here to give it a like and learn. Yeah, so we usually do this starting at 1 p.m. US Eastern, which I believe would be 7 p.m. In Denmark on Tuesdays and Fridays. Day the Jollies, just blue screen to death with nano control. Adam Langford, his is working fine. All right, let me get to a couple of questions. I think we have our question or two that was mailed in. Okay, so we see question, a Media Bay problem. The rating files with stars 1 through 5 at the top of Media Bay does not work for me now, only shows all rating, how to fix it. So I haven't heard of that. So let's say if I come over here to Media Bay, I can see all ratings here. I could just select like my 3-star ratings, which a lot of libraries will have. Or if we all files here, or if I'm looking for 4-star, 5-star, and just select it there. If we're in so let's come over here to say now not all libraries will have ratings on them. So let's say go to electric bass. So now I can see my Media Bay stars here. And let's take a look on the right zone Media Bay. So if we come here to under media, we can see rating. And as we do this, we could say, okay, I'm looking for 3 stars. So let's come over, jump back to VST instruments, to Italian Sonic. Electric bass. So we come over to FM Lab here, and then so if we say let's go to media and we look at our ratings here, select like our 3 stars, and so if we had changed different ratings here, we could see our different ratings. So if I come back to my full Media Bay, say let's go to FM Lab. Okay, above the cyclotron, I'll give that 5 stars. So now when we want to jump back here, let's go to FM Lab, and I'm looking for a 5-star, and now just come over there and see the ratings appear. So it looks like that's all working, but make sure that all the libraries have the ratings, but I can see the ratings listed here. So the ratings that are in the library will show up. But if we don't see any ratings here, it could be because that particular library does not have ratings, then you could adjust the add ratings as necessary. Okay, let me jump back, see if we have live questions. Got just a couple more minutes. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. Okay. All right. So we'll see. And I think we are out of questions. We'll see. There's usually a couple minutes from when I talk to when you guys hear, or a couple, maybe 20 seconds. So we'll see if any more questions come up. We have just about 2 or 3 minutes left. We'll see if there's any last minute quick questions. If not, we'll wrap up. And thank everyone for all the great questions. Hope that everyone's learned a new tip or trick. Okay, Jolly says time for him to sleep. He's filled with spaghetti and ready for sleep. Sounds good. I have to do the index for a few hours after dinner, 3 or 4 hours. Have a great night's rest. Great. Capital Razor 927. Thanks, Greg. Welcome. Another 10 seconds or so. See if there's more questions. If not, we'll wrap. Good kind of words, Adam. All right, so it looks like we are out of questions. Thanks, everyone. Hope that everyone is able to stay safe and healthy, and we'll see everyone back on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Michael Graybill on. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up, and we'll see everyone back on Friday. Thank you very much.